doing a very good job. I'm Abdi from Kenya, Nairobi specifically. My question is, I hear that Joe Biden is a Christian Catholic.
Okay, Christian Catholic. There we go. There we go.
Sure.
I got it. That was the key thing. I hear Joe Biden is something, and then the question hinges on what he is, and I'm sitting there trying to figure out what he said. Christian Catholic, and it's not his fault, Abdi. It's not your fault. I'm just deaf. So we got it. Christian Catholic, and can we appeal to that? Joe Biden is the biggest hypocrite the world has ever seen. You can't, he likes to label himself, Mr. Working Class. There's nothing working class about Joe Biden. He calls himself a good Catholic. He's not a good Catholic. He doesn't live a Christian life. So appealing to his faith isn't going to do anything. He is a narcissist of the worst kind. I think we could call him an odious narcissist. And
odious.
How do you appeal to narcissism? You can't reason with a narcissist. All a narcissist wants to do is pump himself up, make himself better, make himself bigger and more more expansive than he already is. So no, I don't think that we can appeal to Joe Biden's faith. Joe Biden's going straight to hell when he dies.
All right. And it's great to have you aboard, Abdi. And heinous is a good word, but odious is just a little bit better.
Well, I might be adopting heinous going forward.
You want to vary it a little bit?
Well, there's a movie. This is heinous, but I have to remember.
That's something I'll try to dig that up for the next.
Yeah, we have to dig that one up.
All right, Moperger.
Oh, I know what it is. I got it.
Oh. Everybody hold on.
I got it.
The weapons inspector has made a recollection. Go ahead.
It's My Cousin Vinny.
Oh, one of my favorite
movies. My Cousin Vinny, and it's the prosecutor. Heinous. Heinous action. So we have to get that quote.
Well, you made it easier for me to find it now. Yeah. My Cousin Vinny, heinous. Note to self. Moperger from Oregon. In 1974, I spent 6 weeks traveling the USSR on a college exchange program. Please contrast the societal USSR then with Russia today, won't you?
Well, the problem is I have to add 14 years to 1974 from my, point of comparison, because I went in 1988. But I would imagine 1988, I think we were getting at the, Russia was starting to crumble. Our Soviet Union was starting to crumble, starting to fray. I think in 1974, the Brezhnev era was still strong. I think that that the Soviet Union was vibrant. Society was established. Russian or Soviet culture was alive and well and living. So I think if you were traveling through the Soviet Union in 1974, you would have seen, a very viable society. I mean, I've looked at movies from that time, and it's modern. I mean, these guys were groovy. They had the right clothes, the right hairdo. They were listening to the right music. So again, they still had combine drivers. I'm fairly certain that the song about the combine drivers that we talked about earlier would have been a song that would have resonated with the working class back in 1974. In 1988, it was still, when I got off the airplane in Moscow, it was still it was a clean city. It was a pristine city. It was a city that I think the Soviet Union could very much been proud of, and they were proud of it. But literally, what a difference a year makes, 2 years. By 1990, they had opened up the first McDonald's, and I have to tell you, the humiliation that that old Soviets felt in looking at the youth flock to McDonald's to line up to eat this Western fast food. A lot of people were just like, we don't understand why they're doing that. We don't understand what's going on. So I think we were looking at a society that was more in transition in 1988 when I was there than in 1974. The 1990s, and this is one of the things that just was, I mean, I knew about this, I've talked about this, but to go to Russia and talk to people who lived through the 1990s, they're, without exception, unless you're some billionaire, without exception, the 1990s was the worst decade in modern Russian history. The life expectancy plummeted. At one point, it went below 50. At 49 was the life expectancy of a Russian male. And one of the reasons is that they just were drinking themselves to death because it was hopeless. Suicides. Again, you talk to people, the people I talked about growing up, and they said, when I grew up, they'd show a photograph of their friends. And then there they are, all of them there. And this guy committed suicide. This guy disappeared. This guy died of alcoholism. This guy went to jail because they were all kids that were well adjusted. But when they grew up and entered the 1990s, it was absolute nightmare. Absolute nightmare. Everything was falling apart. It was hopeless. Families broke up. We talked about the mother. It's the Russian mom, the Russian women that saved Russia, because the men were drinking themselves to death. The men were committing suicide. There was to give you an example, in Crimea, they had built they were going to build a nuclear power plant, and they had all the construction lined up, everything going, and they had actually recruited the scientists and their families and put them all in place in their apartments and everything. And then the Soviet Union collapsed, and they said, we're not going to do that project anymore. And now, not only that, but all these scientists who used to be the pride of Soviet society were unemployed. And they couldn't move anywhere because now this was Ukraine. It wasn't Russia. And they just started killing themselves. They would wake up in the morning, go to the top of their apartment building, jump out and die. They would hang themselves. They would drink themselves to death. They would kill their families. I mean, so people got to understand how bad it was in the 1990s, how bad it was in the 1990s, and then take a look at Russia today. Is it perfect? No. Are there problems in Russia? Hell yeah, there's problems. I mean, one of the problems right there in Crimea, we were driven into Alexander's hometown, the village where he grew up. And, people don't talk about it, but when the Ukrainians took over in 1992, they treated the Russians like absolute crap. They treated them like dirt. They bullied the Russians. They tried to get Russians to flee, and they just stopped funding projects. And so infrastructure started to collapse all around. No attention was paid to these villages. And so the village that he grew up in, there was no running water. There's no gas. There's a gas line, a major gas line 500 meters away. It'd be very easy to tap into that gas line and run feeders to the village so that the families could heat themselves using cheap, affordable gas. Instead, they have to pay for electricity. And instead of having a bill that's $12 a month, they end up paying $200 a month, which for them is it's a burden that people can't sustain. They have to go out and buy their own water. They pulled their resources together and they dug a well, so now they can pump water in to wash hands and do basic stuff, but you can't drink that water. And to get drinking water, you have to go out and you have to buy the drinking water and and replenish it that way. There's no canalization, which means there's no flushing toilets. So use your imagination. That's a reality of Russia today. It's 2023, and there's a village in Crimea. The Russian government has been in control of Crimea since 2014, And yet, this is that situation. Questions. As people always say, they support Putin, but they have questions. They want to know why this is. But here's the beauty of that. Despite all of that, when we arrived, they invited us in their home. The house was pristine. It was clean. These people clearly have pride in themselves. And they had the table. And you could, in the United States, I don't think we understand the concept of the table. I understand it because my wife is Georgian and her mom was Georgian. And I learned that you don't go into a Georgian home and just hang out. You go into a Georgian home and there's the table. What I mean by table is all the damn food in the world is located on that table. And we came in, and Fatima, who was her name, she had the table set up for us, and it was lovely. And it's the other thing is, in her house, she has 4 cows. She gets up every morning at 5:30 and milks the cows, and from that she makes her own cheese. So they had the cheese out there. It's cheese she made. They have the grapes, and they have the vegetables, and all the stuff on the table was there. They slaughter a certain number of steers a year. And they store the meat, and the meat we're eating came from. So everything on that table was from her house, from her family, from the farm. And it was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. So, sometimes I think that, if you took one of these typical Western journalists and they went there and they experienced what I said, I think the story they would focus on is, no flushing toilets in the village of X, shit running in the streets, this, that, and the other thing. The story I would write about is the hospitality, the humanity, the wonderful nature of these people, and to see her greet Alexander, he was their next door neighbor. And here's the other thing too, to show you the quality of these people. When Alexander and his grandparents fled Crimea in 1993 because of the Ukrainians, people don't talk about it. The Ukrainians are not good people, the government. I'm not talking about the people, I'm talking about the government, the anti-Russian policies. So they fled. And they wanted to sell their house, but the Ukrainians basically were running fire sale prices. So they held on to it. When they came back after in 2014-15, they came back. The house was painted white. It was clean. It was fully furnished. The neighbors had done this every year. They would paint the house every year, clean the house. And they said, "Why did you do it?" They said, "Because we hoped that one day you would return. You're our neighbors." And this is, and they're Tatars too. The people that did this are Tatars, and Alexander's family, Russian Orthodox, but they were neighbors. This is the quality of people that are there. That's the story. That's the story of Russia, is the Russian people. Whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Muslim, whether you're a Buddhist, doesn't matter. These are people with a heart. These are good people. These are the people you would want to be neighbors with. And that's what we have to try and capture. That's what I'm going to try and capture. And that's the story we're going to try and tell, so that Americans will put pressure on their government to stop the insane policies of pursuing confrontation, especially confrontation that's attached to nuclear weapons, which could end the world as we know it.
Very well said, Scott. There are so many different ways one could react to the story you just told. One thought that was running through my mind is how precious water is. I don't know about you, but I try not to waste water. I feel guilty about it. And then I think, well, geez, if everybody else isn't doing the same thing, what difference does it make? But what do you do at home? Are you conscious of that too? And just, make sure that you don't use any more water than necessary? Or?
Well, Marina is, because she pays the water bill. And, I don't think I can't speak for her, but I think her perspective is, we're not millionaires. We don't have a money tree in the backyard. And when the water bill comes in, we need to do what we can to reduce expenditure, which means be frugal. There's no drought here in New York. And so, we're not under any water restrictions. It's just a matter of what you can afford. If you have the money, you can run water all day long, make your lawns look as green as you want, etc. In Crimea, another thing that a lot of people don't understand is when the Russians moved back in to Crimea in 2014, claiming it as their own, the Ukrainians built a dam across the canal that connected the water from the river to Crimea, that was used for irrigation. It was used to water the farmers' fields, was used for everything. And Crimea from 2014 until 2022 had extreme water shortages. And some of the land, if you don't if you don't have water going on, again, I'm not an agricultural expert, but my understanding is that the salinity of the soil rises. So basically it becomes, desert-like and unable to sustain life. And this was what was happening to Crimea, because in the isthmus that connects the Crimean Peninsula with the mainland, there's some salt marshes and things of that nature. And if you don't flush it out, or you keep it vibrant with water, that salt leaches into the soil, and it becomes this desert that's incapable of sustaining life. And that was the direction that Crimea was headed. But the Russians, once they moved in and they captured that area, they blew up the dam, and so the water's flowing. So there's now water available, but there's still no canalization. There's no sewage pipes, and I just hope that maybe, we talked about this earlier, people watch this show. That's why I have to really watch my language, and I have to do a better job of learning names, because these people honored me and treated me really well. And I need to respect them enough to make sure that I pronounce their names right and I don't swear for them. But
in my mispronunciation of Chechnya.
Well, that's okay, but they'll forgive you, but they won't forgive me. But the fact of the matter is, hey, if you're the governor of Crimea or you're the mayor of that region, fix the problem, dude. It's not that hard. Okay? Tap into the gas line, give these people the gas they deserve. Dig some damn lines, get the water in there, get canalization so they can have flushing toilets. It's 2023. There's no excuse for this.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Vladimir from Geneva, what are your thoughts on Zelensky's condition of receiving an ascension roadmap for Ukraine before attending the NATO summit in July? Will he change his mind last minute, or will NATO feel pressured to provide an ascension roadmap for Ukraine? If he doesn't attend, what impact will it have on NATO-Ukraine relations? Watch your language, remember.
Well, this is Zelensky we're talking about, so I can say anything I want, but I wasn't going to go too low. But what fantasy world does he live in? Does he not understand that he will never be a member of NATO, that Ukraine will never be a member of NATO, ever? There's no chance, zero chance of Ukraine ever being a member. NATO doesn't respect. Hey, Zelensky, they hate you. They hate you, dude. Want to know why they hate? How you know they hate you? Because they're letting you slaughter your people. No friend would do this. No friend would ever. Viktor Orban, the much maligned leader of Hungary, prime minister, was answering questions from a British reporter the other day, and they're talking about this, and he said, how could NATO? How can you? If you're a human, how can you support these policies? Don't you understand that this war, it can't be won by Ukraine? It can't be won. There's no chance of it being won. So why would you continue to flow munitions to continue a conflict that can't be won? You're literally condemning, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians to die, tens of millions of people to be displaced, trillions of dollars of infrastructure to be destroyed. So Zelensky, they don't like you, dude. They don't respect you. They're using you. Using you for what, you might ask yourself? Well, look at the satanic sneer on the face of Lindsey Graham when he talked about the best investment we ever made, dead Russians. Another man that's going straight to hell. Anyways. So no, Zelensky is delusional. Literally, he's a delusional person, and there's just simply no reality that's linked to his demands. They aren't going to let Ukraine into NATO. Ukraine's not going to survive this conflict, and